In many countries all over the world, the State of Israel is presented from a non-flattering angle. It is described as a apartheid state that there should be sanctions against it, like boycott or diplomatic isolation. And this is where we fit in. Nice to meet you. ADL Israel. We operate in order to strengthen Israel's image in the world, and we operate wherever there is racism, discrimination, and anti-Semitism. The ADL was established in the U.S. over 100 years ago, and it is the leading international organization in combating hatred. Since 77, we've been active in Israel as well through our office in Jerusalem. We are cleaning discourse from anti-Semitism, Nazi images, and delegitimization through monitoring them in the different media outlets, and we bring policy shapers and global opinion leaders to get to know Israel in an unmediated way. We believe that it's important how people view us from the outside, but what's even more important is what's happening here inside. And for that end, we develop various educational programs against racism and discrimination in Israel. And whenever things get too heated, we place a stop sign and we bring together Jews and Arabs, right and left, east and west. And in this way, we strengthen Israel's internal resilience. In 2017, we launched the Israel Conference for Social Cohesion in order to establish a vision for Israel for 2048. We urge all of you to join our social legion and to participate in the protection and defending of Israeli society, the ADL in Israel, today for tomorrow. Good morning. It's so wonderful to be here this morning. Good morning and welcome to all the participants of the conference, Knesset members, ambassadors, representatives of the diplomatic corps in Israel, the delegation from the Anti-Defamation League in the U.S., headed by Jonathan Greenblatt, global CEO. Yes, yes, you can applaud. Ms. Carol Nouriel, the Director General of the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League in Israel. Welcome to the Israel Conference for Social Cohesion. Applause, please. This is the fifth conference, and this year it's actually part of the Israel Social Cohesion Week, and this is the first time we are holding such a week, and there's a reason for that. The recent conferences of the ADL have been intertwined between the endless Israeli election campaigns, which were quite horrible, and this time as well, we are only 2 weeks after the voting took place, and this time as well, the election campaign reflected all the difficulties and tensions of Israel 2022 with harsh words of polarization and hatred and fake news and lies and incitement, things that were disseminated by, let's put it mildly, the people at the top. Everyone was against everyone. These are not easy days to the Israeli society, which is so rifted anyhow. Therefore, the importance of this conference is merely in holding it. A conference which invites to it all parts of Israeli society from all sectors, from all ethnic groups, from all religions, because we are doomed to live here together. So let us talk about the most painful points and try to come up together with a social mission for all of us, a social vision for all of us. We're delighted to see the young generation who is joining us in today's conference. Thank you, generation. And the generation which shaped in the past and is currently shaping Israel's nature. We have here educators and high school students from Rishon LeZion, Bat Yam, Sajur, Modi'in, Pki'in, Abu Tlul. Yes, representatives of the Student Council of the All Israeli Boarding Schools, and representatives of Kol Ami, the pre-military academy, Mechina. Wow, I feel like a guide in a scouts group. We have here also representatives of the media, decision makers, third sector organizations. We have such a busy and packed day ahead of us, which is filled with doing good. Now I'm honored to invite Mr. Yaron Neuderberg, the director of ADL Israel. Yaron, please. Well, I can't see you, but you can see me. Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm delighted and proud to open the fifth Israeli conference on social cohesion. We are convening here after the results of an almost fifth election campaign, and we'll hear today about the social impacts of the incitement and hatred and polarization between the different parts of this nation, about tribalism and rifts in Israeli society. And even today in this room, we have different religions, different factions, different groups, and different opinions on various topics. But what we all have in common, at least here this morning, is that we all agree on one thing. The most important rule of the game is to come to the table, be part of the dialogue, to speak, to listen. I'm delighted to see here today a lot of people from different backgrounds, high school students from all groups of Israeli society, from all parts of Israel, and a delegation from the Anti Defamation League who came especially from the US for this conference. Thank you so much for coming. For about a year now, I've been the director of ADL Israel, and over these months, I've been exposed to the amazing work of the Israeli office headed by Carol, whether it's forming various ties and networks in the different groups and educational programs, both in school settings and non-formal settings, and various public activity for the prevention of discrimination and racism in Israel. The overarching mission of the ADL is, and I quote, to put an end to the defamation of the Jewish people and to ensure justice and fairness for all. The Israeli office is one of the most relevant and significant international branches of this organization, establishes a local relevance to this, and works against hatred towards Jews all over the world. And if anybody thinks that Israelis are not exposed to anti Semitism in Israel, well, today, through computer games and through social media networks, we are re encountering that. And the greatest mission, actually, of the ADL in Israel is in the prevention of hatred and racism against any group within the Israeli sphere. And I'm proud to say that this week and this conference, which was packed with activities on social cohesion, is merely one of the milestones we've been engaged in over our years of activities, because this is what we do all year long to combat hatred, to form ties against different groups in Israel, and to establish social cohesion. Our mission is extremely important. The uh, rifts among Israeli society is ever growing, and I believe this is the strategic greatest threat on the existence of the state of Israel, more than the international economic recession and even more than Iran. History teaches us that hatred and rifts between different parts of the society lead to an internal collapse and destruction. Therefore, I urge everybody sitting in this hall today, at the end of the day, to leave this place knowing that we have no other choice but to be united, even if we don't agree on anything, and we must curb the discourse, must lower the flames, and to listen and speak. And of course, I'm not deluding myself that this day will resolve all the rifts and dissent in this nation, but hopefully we will be able to establish some kind of a dialogue. Thank you, everyone. May we have a wonderful day of discussions, agreements, and disagreements, but mainly of discussions and forms of understanding each other. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much, Yaron Neuderfer. And now we would like to hear the address of the President of the State of Israel, Mr. Yitzhak Herzog. Dear participants of the Social Cohesion Conference, the people of the ADL, led by their Director General, Carol Noriel, ladies and gentlemen, the topic that is at the center of this conference, social cohesion in Israel, is such an important goal, which is often part of our lives. In order to understand the importance of this conference, none of us needs to see any data or any facts or numbers. We all live and breathe this great challenge, this regretful reality. There is nothing new under the Israeli sun. It is warm, but sometimes even it burns us. It has such diversity, but also so many rifts and divisions and different groups. And of course, this becomes even more apparent in election campaigns, where the volume rises and every group, every sector, every party radicalizes their worldviews. But, ladies and gentlemen, it's not only in times of elections. The talk is becoming more and more very violent and demeaning to others, and it is especially such in the social media networks, even though they play such an important role in verbal abuse and alienation in society. But despite the tensions, one cannot, of course, deny, I must say, that there are also some spots of light. The fact that we all talk about how we should manage our dialogue, and this important conference is, of course, a wonderful example for that. This teaches us just what a source of concern this is for so many. Most of Israelis understand that this is a necessary condition for the resilience of the Israeli society. I travel this country and I meet people from all groups, and I see things that are not always reflected in the media. I see the solidarity, the goodness, the spirit of volunteering, the openness, the tolerance, the interest levels, and the attention. Therefore, I am confident that if we are relentless, and if we continue to show care for how we conduct our discussions amongst each others, then we will be able to overcome all these voices that seek to divide us. So I'd like to thank all those who were involved in the important work that underlies this conference. First and foremost, you, of course, my dear friend Carol Nuriel, and the amazing staff of the ADL, and I'd like to wish you a wonderful conference and fruitful discussions. Alu v'etzlichu. All the best. Thank you to the President of the State of Israel, Mr. Herzog, the Israeli Office of the Anti-Defamation League, and representatives of the parent organization in the U.S., which will soon celebrate its 110th anniversary. We have here today with us a delegation of the leadership of the ADL who came especially to participate in this conference and in this special Israel Social Cohesion Week. I'm delighted to invite to the stage Jonathan Greenblatt, as CEO of the ADL.
Allow me to call to the podium CEO and National Director of ADL, Mr. Jonathan Greenblatt, to address us. Mr. Greenblatt, please.
Boker Tov. I want to thank everyone for joining us today for the 5th Annual ADL Social Cohesion Summit. And I want to extend a special appreciation to President Herzog for those welcoming remarks, to ADL Israel Board Chair Yaron Neudorfer, who you just heard from, and to ADL Senior Director Carol Nuriel. As part of this year's summit, I'm honored to be leading a delegation of senior leaders from the United States. These are top ADL volunteers who are here for a week of encounters and meetings with a wide range of Israeli communities. This delegation, like all of us at ADL, we are here as proud Zionists committed to the Jewish state and to defending it against those who seek to undermine its legitimacy, indeed, as a Jewish state. And as Zionists, we are also committed to a better understanding of Israel beyond that which we are able to read in the headlines. And as supporters of the democratic and Jewish state of Israel, we also care about its well-being and want to ensure that it upholds basic values that we all care about, like equality, justice, religious pluralism, fair treatment of minorities, etc. To that end, our delegation has visited the Israeli Arab community in Al-Fahim and the Haredi, Dati, and Haloni community of Beit Shemesh. And as we visited those places and engaged with the people, we essentially experienced Israel as it is, with all of its bright spots and its very real challenges. We discussed how to bridge the divides between the different extremes within this society, which echo the challenges that people around the world face in this moment when we seem so polarized. when there are extremes trying to pull apart societies, pressures on the nonprofit sector and on democracy as we know it. I really believe that it's our commitment, again as Zionists, to push for Israel and to do all we can to help the Jewish state to overcome these differences and bridge these divides. Because these issues, those that we're going to discuss here today, are not easy to grapple with. They're not easy in Israel, they're not easy in America or around the world, where we face the rise of authoritarianism and the persistence of terror regimes in places like Tehran or Moscow or others that seek to pull us apart. But we at ADL are committed to working to confront these challenges head on, no matter how daunting the task. Your presence here, all of you, especially the high school students, is a sign of your commitment to wanting to learn about the issues and to try to find the solutions. So we're incredibly grateful to have you here as our partners. And this will indeed be a journey to make sure that we can realize the Zionist vision so that Israel can truly be a place for all of its citizens, Jews and Arabs, Jews, Muslims and Druze, Ashkenazi, Sephardi, Mizrahi, Russians, Ethiopians, gay and straight, men and women, all of us together achieving the Zionist ideal. So thank you for joining us here today, and we look forward to a day of rich and provocative conversation that will hopefully enlighten us all.
Thank you, Jonathan. Mr. Greenblatt.
The Anti-Defamation League has over 25 chapters or offices all over the U.S. combating anti-Semitism, racism, anti-Zionism, combating any threats on democracy, against hate crimes. I think these are things that we're beginning to need more and more here in Israel. The Israeli office has been active here in Israel for over 47 years and addresses the two topics that are the most important elements of this organization, combating anti-Semitism and racism. I'm now honored to invite to the stage Ms. Carol Nouriel, the CEO of ADL Israel, to present this annual survey about what concerns us about social cohesion in Israel. This poll was conducted especially for this conference. Ms. Nouriel, Carol, please. Wow, it's a shame I can't see everything. I can only see shadows, but I'm so excited. First of all, I'm going to go a bit off script for a sec because it's important for me to say to Danny, who said we're doomed to live together, the exact opposite. We are blessed to be living here together. It's such a blessing. Good morning and welcome to the 2022 Israel Social Cohesion Conference. I'm delighted to see you here. We'll start by viewing a brief movie from this week we've just had, in which we visited various communities all over Israel. Let's see what we had.
I want people come here to Umm to be with the culture, with the people, with the spiritual place here. Look to us, not 2 million Palestinians in Israel. I would love to see them say 2 millions of dreams, 2 millions of names.
احنا هنا رسالتنا دائما نقول للمواطن اليهودي تعال على الوسط العربي، شوفني، لما تشوفني متعرف على كل مشاكلي وعلى كل الاسلوب الحياه اللي انا عايش فيه، وقت احنا بنصل لمرحله من التعايش ومن الشراكه.
Bet Shemesh today in 2022 is to a great extent an Israeli microcosm. There are enough people who love to take this Israeli discussions, talk about Israel to the extremes, but I'm an extremist in my moderation. I think that compromise is actually power and not weakness. my extended family, we have such a broad variety of people, and each individual is different, and each has his or her own place. The kind of talk is always very connecting, and we have a lot in common as individuals. In every community, there are the people who are more open, willing to hear, who are curious, and who are not afraid of dialogue, to see the goodness in every person and to connect between all the people. And indeed, this human encounter can solve everything.
This week we're holding some conversations in Israel related to social cohesion, really trying to give voice to minorities in Israel.
ממלכתיות is a Ben-Gurion concept. It's something that defines the relationship between state, public sector, politicians, and the citizens.
I think that when we're talking about mamlachtiyut, this is the question we're facing. What is this thing which is at the center? Is it still there? When does each camp converge around their banner, and when are all eyes directed at one national campfire or tribal campfire? I feel that in Israeli, citizenship belongs to the left and nationalism to the right, but there's still one concept that still hasn't been attributed, not necessarily to the left or to the small. That term is mamlachtiyut. I thought it as an advantage.
It is really a function of a set of norms. Unspoken, understood norms. And that the reality is that it's those norms that are the oil that makes the engine work. And when you don't have oil in the engine, the gears grind and they break. And so we've really seen that play out in really fairly terrifying ways in recent years. So the engine is important, but if the engine, again, doesn't have the right oil, if the system isn't bound together by healthy norms, the system itself doesn't really matter.
This is the 5th year that we are holding this conference, and I'm so delighted to know that there are people who have been with us since the first conference, but also some new faces. Welcome, everyone, one and all. We have here a leadership delegation from the ADL led by Jonathan Greenblatt as Global CEO.
To welcome ADL's National Commission Mission to Israel. We're so honored to have you here with us today and this week.
I know clearly well that the subject of social cohesion in Israel is very dear to your hearts, and it's so important that you've come to participate in this day together with us. And this day enables us to create some kind of an open and safe space to discuss about some painful issues as well, and there are quite a few such issues. It also creates various thinking channels for decision makers and policy makers. We can all feel very well the impact of these recent years that reflect such strong divisions between us, and our polls show us that with every year that passes we're more and more divided, more and more rifted, but we are not doomed to be like that. Israel will be celebrating its 75th anniversary this year, and after 3/4 of a century we can ask ourselves where we want to be as a society in 2048. 100 years after the establishment of the State of Israel, we've been through 5 election campaigns which were quite complex. It seems that we're all worn out and tired, but there's one piece of data that shows us that it is above who won and who lost. If there was one fear that our fatigue will be translated into indifference, well, we were proven wrong. The rate of voting, the participation rate was higher than ever. 71.3% of Israelis went to vote, and this is a very significant significant ray of light that attests more than anything else to the fact that Israelis are involved. They're not indifferent. They want to make an impact. A high voting rate is a proof of activism, which is a very special role, which has a special role in advancing social activism. So all of us as a society won the elections, but there's another very significant tool for advancing social cohesion, and it is measured in various ways. That is trust between individuals and society, between the individual and the state, between the individual and the state's institutions and leaders, and that has been eroded. And in contrast to what people used to think, it's not just an outcome of everything that's happened in the past decade, but rather a part of a long process of erosion that stems from a disagreement regarding the most important question: who are we? Our ethos for the creation of belonging to all parts of Israeli society is very well ingrained in the concept of a Jewish and democratic state that makes it possible for each of us to feel equal and first among equals in our lives and in our identities. Of course, we're committed to maintaining that, but perhaps even more importantly, to make sure that this concept is still relevant. What does it mean to all of us as a society, and how can I, as a non-Jew, still believe in a Jewish and democratic state? And how, as a community or as a country that believes in democracy, do we expect that even if we have a government that's more homogeneous, just like the one we'll have soon, it'll still broadly represent all groups and take care of all minorities, because this is how you establish broad legitimacy. This is how you build social cohesion beyond all the divisions. Creating a shared ethos that tearing apart the shared vision we all share is not an option. And later on I'll share with you the outcomes of our poll, but we have some distinguished guests with us and I'd like to give them the floor. So thank you very much, everyone, and may we have a wonderful, diverse day. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Carol Nuriel. Thank you so much. Well, 2 weeks after the elections, it can almost be taken for granted that we'll try to summarize what we've had, to let political leaders speak about this topic, about social cohesion, and to what extent are they responsible for the fact that this cohesion is crumbling apart a bit. So now we move on to our first session in our one-on-one political dialogues with leading politicians and journalists. I'm honored to invite Major General in Reserves Orna Barvivai, the Minister of Economics and Industry in Israel, and Moran Azulay, a journalist, a political correspondent from Ynet. Hello to still Minister Barvivai from Yesh Atid. Good morning. I can't really see the teens in the hall, but I could feel them. Yes, they're all here. Hello, everyone, and welcome. I think there is no better time to talk about social cohesion because of the objective state of Israeli society, but also because we're on this seam line just before regime change, and the Speaker of the Knesset said this is a shat ratzon letikun, a good hour, a time that people's hearts are willing and open for tikkun. And let me ask you, to what extent did the outcomes of the election surprise you? Look, we really worked hard so that the values we believe in will be expressed, and for the citizens of Israel to vote for us. When I say to vote for us, these are values of a Jewish and democratic state, and it is a desire after so many election campaigns to come up with some kind of a decisive victory. But as somebody who lives in a democratic state and preaches about the importance of democracy, once the people have spoken, and as much as we regret this, the outcomes of the elections, of course, we accept them. I'm preparing to pass on my ministry. It's a very large ministry because it's in charge of the employment market and the national digital structure and industry as well. I'm preparing to pass it on to my successor, and I can already tell you that I'm really concerned with the trends and declarations I can see. We'll soon talk about these declarations and trends which are a source of concern for you. But when we talk about the outcomes of the elections, let me further stress this new situation. This is a Knesset that's taking a very strong right turn. I've counted 75 Knesset members from the ideological right and another 30 Knesset members from the center, a left that has been almost completely eradicated from these elections. 4 mandates to the Labour Party and 30 to the center parties, and another 11 mandates, parliament seats for the Arab sector. I don't think that we predicted these outcomes in advance. So I'm asking you, where did the Israeli left or Israeli center go wrong if we're trying to do some soul searching here? Look, these elections will be debriefed. Yair Lapid asked me to look into what happened in the field, and these are things that we are yet to learn. When we look at the bottom line, we lost. I mean, I can tell you what I wanted, but the outcome is that we lost. But I think that the state of Israel, in this respect, these trends you're describing, it's making me think a lot whether the Israeli population in general, is it going towards a direction that the values reflected by the leaders reflect its majority. I grew up in a city. I looked at the voting patterns in my hometown, Afula. About 70% voted to Likud and to the right. This is where I grew up, and most of my family still lives there. And I know the people who vote to the Likud party, and I don't see people that Ben Gvir's worldview of radicalizing, or even topics such as respect for women and core studies. It's not their agenda, being against core studies and all the rest. The reflection of the outcome, of course, it's democratic. We must accept the results. In this respect, it's not that I'm undermining it or questioning it, but I'm just asking whether the political reflection of Israeli society is indeed what the majority of Israelis want. Let me further emphasize this, because in these election campaigns, unlike others, everything was out there. Every camp warned against the other camp and the results of the elections, and we have such an unequivocal decision. Maybe something about the ID, the concept needs to be renewed. I don't think we need to change the ideas of a Jewish and democratic state, the Declaration of Independence, the founding forefathers. That Israeli story that I am so connected with. I served in the army for over 30 years. Every year I would take in these young 18-year-olds into the military, and the perception of a Jewish and democratic state, and I believe, by the way, there is no contradiction between the two, has been very significant and will continue to be very significant in the public sphere. But I do think, and with that you are correct, Moran, when you say, look, they have declared, I mean, Ben Gvir spoke very clearly these harsh statements against women in the public sphere, against the LGBTQ community, the core studies, math and English, that instead of being an important element in building Israel's strength for the future, has become a source of political debate. I think that we do need to look into ourselves and see how come one out of every 5 soldiers vote for a party that the person who will head it has no defense or military experience, and they know that when they vote for them, these people might take up these positions. I think is a source of concern. Let me suggest something else. Perhaps this line of the center-left camp, which talked about rejecting or Netanyahu, in the way the other camp interpreted it, they interpreted it as a boycott. Maybe this is what led to this pendulum effect. Look, I don't think so. A lot of people ask us, and in various polls, that the general population wants to have a national unity government. It's a lovely word, of course, and I believe that unity as a value is important, but that's not what I mean by unity, because if I need to change my values or my worldview, and I can see what's happening, I can see who's going to be appointed in senior positions, I understand that the nature of this country as a Jewish country is going to be, this element will be more dominant over the democratic and liberal values, and I don't want to be a part of that. If the meaning is that in order to create this lovely word unity, I need to join forces with somebody that I don't don't believe in their values, I prefer to remain in the opposition, to continue and fight for the values I believe in, and to serve as an alternative for the reality that I inherently cannot accept. My whole life I was in the military. I was the first women major general. I even lit a beacon on the eve of Independence Day honoring Israeli women. I look around me and I see the absence of representation of women. The coalition is much smaller than the opposition, yet we have twice more women. Perhaps it's because of that, a national unity government that will increase women representatives around the government table and will bring in a new voice of half the people. Maybe that's the right thing to do. No. I think that values are not something that can be auctioned or sold. On the contrary, I think that now more than ever we need to establish an alternative that, almost half the nation wants it and consider it to be the most significant alternative for the way they build their lives here. And if we wish to continue, and if we're asking where we're going to in the future, we want to be a Jewish and democratic state, and we cannot blur the distinction between one camp that says Jewish with a clear preference over liberal values and equality, etc., and another camp that says we wish to live here as a country that our entire essence, what we fought for, was in order to bring about this change. So you are taking off unity from the agenda. Yes, for sure, at least at this point. But let me ask you, as a lesson from the outgoing government, can you explain why a young Haredi Jew in Israel feels that the outgoing government doesn't represent him? Look, it's a matter of semantics. You can address the issue of disposable, plates, cups, etc., was against them. But no, I was there when it was decided. It's something very eco-friendly. I'm just giving this as an example how you can build a narrative without any factual foundation. Or, for example, these drinks, soft drinks that are filled with sugar. And Israel has such a high rate of diabetes. I, voted in favor of this. But the purpose wasn't to say I'm against Haredi Jews. I think, and I'm saying this as somebody who is pretty much involved in the labor market, you could come and I'll present whatever program you can think of. In special settings, training, English studies. Now, I see these young Haredi men and women who want to be integrated into the labor market, and I'm wondering how come their politicians represent them. How come they're preventing them from doing it? Since when in the state of Israel has work become a value that is in contradiction to Judaism? When did that happen? And how can we as a country, why would we agree to that? Why prevent this basic option of core studies, math and English lessons, because I see these ultra-Orthodox, these Haredi women who really want to work. And look at the Haredi and look at the Arab women. Less than 40% we want to grow. But so what's the big deal? I think the integration of the Arabs and Haredi into the labor market is critical. It's not a privilege. It is necessary for the growth of Israel. How come you create such antagonism within the Haredi society that, by the way, their leaders are even rejecting you as political partners, and it doesn't matter what you do, you just cannot remove this boycott? I don't know what you mean by a boycott, that they're not willing to be with you in the same coalition. Look, as a matter of fact, I can tell you that throughout my term of office, in the past, before, if we're talking about military service or integration into the labor market, I'm constantly in dialogue with Haredi leaders, and we're trying to find tailored solutions for their population. And just like I speak with Arab leaders, I don't know what boycott means. Look, ultimately, if we're looking ahead and if we want to come up with a vision, a mission statement for this country of a growing economy, look at the economic data in international respect. We are at such a wonderful place, and if we wish to maintain that, what do you think the way that leaders behave in this government that's being formed, do you think that won't have an impact? Do you think, let's look at the judiciary, at the legal system, the overruling clause, that they want to pass with 61 votes. How come we don't understand the essence of this thing? Because if Lapid said yesterday, I will not allow the Americans to investigate the death of a journalist, because we've debriefed this. The legitimacy here is because people know that Israel conducts its investigations impartially. But when you create such explicit lack of balance between the different authorities, you are harming Israel, and it could pose a risk on the Israeli regime, because you're creating a supremacy of one authority over another instead of creating the proper balance of checks and balances. I'd like to confront you with one of the main arguments against the leader of your party, Yair Lapid, and this has to do with the boycott on the Haredim, or by the Haredim. The criticism against him is that once he entered political life, he did not know how to foster the right relations and to create a sufficiently big enough maneuver room in the Knesset so that he could form a government that would take care of everyone. Let me quote something that your partner, until a few years ago, said. Until Ofer Shelach, until he retired from the political arena, he said, Yair Lapid has a glass ceiling. How can you break through this glass ceiling? I think that, just look at what's happening. Look at all the offices. Our investment was never sectorial in the past 18 months. It was all about building Israel's capabilities to address its needs. And I believe that everyone, and Lapid definitely recognizes the importance of the existence of all of us. We're all here to stay. Nobody's going to get up and leave. Even the comments of some of the people who find it difficult to accept the outcomes of the relations, I think we're a strong and robust country. And I think that the voting rates here indicate just how much Israelis understand the impact that they have on democracy. It was just presented here, an over 70% rate. And I think what we need to do is to build the roads, the path to a respectful discourse. This is what I'm constantly trying to achieve in order to indeed create this openness for one purpose: what's good for the state of Israel, not what's good for any specific sector at the expense of the majority. Well, now you're leading me to the next question, because we did talk about criticism on Lapid. Criticism against Netanyahu was that he constantly contributed to the divisive kind of talk in Israel. And now immediately, as we've learned the outcomes of the elections, in his victory speech and in other speeches, he talks quite a lot about the need to lower the flames, to create peace between us, to lead to reconciliation. When you hear him saying these messages, are you pleased with that, or are you in disbelief? I wish I could believe him, and I'm saying this with such a great and profound sadness and regret. I don't believe him because, there have been enough distractions, enough lies, a campaign that was clearly, its purpose was to harm specific population groups, and accepting the agenda of these extremist parties who are harming women, who are harming LGBTQ. And today, to stand on the stage after such a long 5 election campaigns and to say, I am mamlachti and I will do it in a way that accepts everyone, I find it difficult to believe. But having said that, I really, really hope that he does mean what he says, and may he continue in doing so. That would be the best thing for this country. What does it mean that you will reach out to reconciliation? Look, in principle, we're going to be in opposition for the coalition on any decisions that are against the better interest of the state of Israel. Let me tell you, we will not allow to trample on democracy, to trample on population groups. We will do everything we can in order to represent the majority of the population in Israel. But in every decision that will come in this Knesset, which is for the benefit of the majority, which is in line with our principles or values, they voted on paying tuition for soldiers in order to embarrass the coalition, or with the entry visas to the U.S. that was also prevented from many Israelis, just, to they bit off, our nose, but it spites everybody's face. But let's talk a bit. Let's talk a bit about Mansour Abbas, the person who wanted to be a partner, who brought a new idea. You embarked on a Jewish-Arab partnership in the government that not a lot of people thought would be formed. And quite a lot has been said about whether this experiment succeeded or failed. When you look back as a minister, what do you think? Let me tell you that I think that Mansour Abbas is a brave man. I see him here. I would have said that even if I wouldn't have seen you here. I have tremendous appreciation. Mansour, I didn't even know that you were walking in. I asked this question spontaneously. Let me just say that I have tremendous appreciation for Mansour. He knows that as somebody who expresses such a unique voice that says, I represent the Arab sector, the needs of this sector that have been neglected for so many years. And look at the facts. If you look at the quality of education, if you look at industry that I'm responsible for, if you look at economic aspect, quite intentionally, this population has not been treated sufficiently. They've not received all the means they need. For over a decade, this lack of governance, it's become a threat for entire society. And some people said this belongs to this marginal sector. It's just 20% of the population, so they ignored it, but it's present in our lives today. And those who didn't address this for a decade was elected to address this today. Hopefully they'll succeed. I'm saying this from the bottom of my heart. I truly wish that this government will manage to address these gaps in governance and all other things that have been neglected for so many years. Mansour, with the unique voice he brings to the Arab world. I looked yesterday at Ayman Ouda, who refused to be photographed with the Israeli flag. That was my next question. Do you understand that? And I cannot identify in any way whatsoever with somebody who does not accept the flag, the symbols of the state, the government or the state of Israel. So what is that person doing in the Knesset if he doesn't consider himself part of it? And Mansour, I believe he represents something else. I want to belong. Please see what my needs are, and let's try and solve these problems together. And this is why I have such great appreciation for him. Minister Orna Barvivai from Yesh Atid, thank you so much. Thank you, and good luck to the government of Israel and to the state of Israel. Yeah, that's something we all share. Now I'm honored to invite to the stage for another one-on-one discussion Naama Lazimi, number 2 at the Havoda, at the Labor Party, and my friend and colleague Amir Ivgi from Galei Tzahal IDF Radio. Hello, good morning, everyone. Good morning. Member of Knesset Naama Lazimi, hello, and good morning. Hello. It's such a pleasure to be here and to see everyone. We are a day after the Knesset was sworn in. It was actually the first festive swearing in for you. Yes, I entered the Knesset through the Norwegian law, so I didn't attend this occasion last time. I had a lot of mixed feelings. On the one hand, it's such an exciting day to try to work for the people. It's the greatest privilege, but still there are a lot of fears and apprehensions, and I hope that will not be realized. So why don't you take me to your personal upheaval you've experienced in recent months, not just in yet another election campaign, but on a personal level. After such a tremendous political achievement for you, first place in the Labor Party primaries, tremendous success as far as you're concerned, and yet also one of the greatest failures in politics, what happened with the Israeli Labor Party in these elections. Yes, absolutely. Let me tell you, as proper disclosure, Thursday, after the double envelopes were counted, I physically became ill. It wasn't just emotional pain. I really looked forward to the government that will be formed together with us. And in my perception, true unity is with the Haredi community, the Arab sector, the Haredi sector. And I was hoping for something broader, something more representative. And we woke up to these news that, on a personal level, the party I belong to, which founded this country, which placed the infrastructure for this country, the only social democratic party left in Israel that's left with only 4 mandates. It's quite an upheaval, but it places such tremendous responsibility upon our shoulders, upon our, ideological baggage. And for this country, I mean, maybe I sound like I'm filled with pathos, and of course there's pain, tremendous pain, but we also understand the magnitude of the responsibility. But before responsibility and before the responsibility, what is your share in the failure of the Labour Party? First of all, I think that as a bloc, we didn't operate well. We weren't integrated. We didn't work as one cohesive unit. Let me say that it's my rule, and I assume personal responsibility over this, that it won't happen in the opposition. We need to be coordinated. We need to know how to work together. Well, it doesn't seem like this is what's going to happen. If you've heard what people are saying, yes, that's why I'm saying this. We just don't have the privilege of personal disputes, and baggage will serve as a counter to what the people need. They need us. And let me say something about the opposition. There is such a thing which is called coalitionary discipline. Of course, there are coalitionary agreements and there's discipline. And an opposition is sovereign to choose where to insist, where not to insist, and to act for the better good, the better interest of the nation. But in this recent Knesset, we heard of something new, the discipline of the opposition. I think it was mistaken to cancel the American visas, etc. The opposition is never an opposition to the people. It's an opposition to the government, to the coalition, but not to the general Israelis. I'll be matter of fact. If the Knesset does something positive for Israelis, then we will support that. We will not serve as an opposition to the people. If there are things that I believe that are destructive to democracy, to political institutions, to the general population, just like we're discovering that Yahadut Torah party wants to take back the early childhood daycare centers to the Ministry of the Economy, not to the Ministry of Education. We will serve as an opposition to that. We will not stand for that. But you've gone in different directions, because I'm already thinking about the Knesset. Maybe you did it on purpose. I asked what was your part, what was your share in the failure of the Labour Party, and maybe we can focus not on the failure of the entire bloc, but on that of the Labour Party. I've said this publicly, and I would like to say that because the Labour Party has such a broad ideological baggage, I think that the campaign didn't give any hope or horizon to Israelis, and we did not learn how to speak to other target populations the way I see it. The Labour Party is an all-Israeli party. Let me tell you, I grew up at Migdal HaEmek. My father was the secretary of the Labour Party. It was the secretary of the Labour Party, where they had more votes than the Likud at Migdal HaEmek. And Amir, that's not the party we are today. We don't belong to everyone, and we need to return to that. And that's my own personal mission, a party that addresses issues of life itself. My dear friend Mansour Abbas is sitting here. He fought with me in this last Knesset for a minimum wages of 40 shekels an hour, because this is something that affects all sectors, that affects the entire population. This is something that both Jews and Arabs can understand together. Over 1 million people work on minimum wages in Israel and can't make ends meet. I don't know if people here, most of the people in this country who are poor are working people, and this is a reality we must change. And it pains me that this wasn't our campaign. And I've said this, and did you try to talk about it in real time to say to Merav Michaeli, look, the direction of our campaign, it doesn't appeal to the Israelis in the periphery or to Israeli Arabs. I mean, you cannot only focus on the people who live between Herzliya and Tel Aviv, with all due respect to where we're sitting at. Yes, I said this, but perhaps I didn't say this enough. From looking at hindsight after the elections, I guess I didn't say this loudly enough, not with enough determination, and part of the soul searching and the drawing of lessons, both on the personal and on the general levels. Ultimately, a perception of change is not conveyed merely by let's replace who we think is wrong for this country, but you also need to suggest an alternative policy and vision, and that's our job. And I believe that to be my job today, because we need to change and correct things, and also these are the values I believe in. And as you look to the left and to the right, or to the sideways, in order not to grasp onto political terms such as right and left, who are your partners? We don't see any people who are an explicit social left in the Knesset, or a Mizrahi left. If we look at the periphery, which is something very dear to your heart, look, the Knesset has been reduced. A lot of people who were like Shali Rechimovich, Dov Chanin, Ilan Gilon of blessed memory, people who advocated social rights. These are people who had a very broad basis, and it seems like they've disappeared. But I'm telling you that we have with whom to collaborate, even from within the coalition. My partners such as Rav Gafni, Moshe Arbel, Inon Azulay, Ophir Katz from the Likud. We have counterparts to work with, and I hear that and from the opposition, I mentioned Mansour, you've mentioned Sheli Yechimovic, and she even was happy about the fact that Aryeh Deri might be Minister of Finance. What do you think about that? Look, politics isn't utopia. We always need to look at the scales and see what are the options and what should we choose. So among the options, I would lean more towards somebody who's more of a social figure, but his social perception is very close to yours. Let me emphasize something on a lot of things that are related to assistance to a marginalized, poor, and disenfranchised populations. Will probably agree, but my worldview is a universal worldview that says, beyond the fish, we need to give fishing rods. You need to establish mechanisms that will create equality and narrowing of gaps, and not just the most immediate relief at that moment. I'm not saying not to do that, because I also act in order to achieve that. But a country that doesn't know how to create platforms that will reduce inequality, that's growing deeper and deeper, that's not my policy. My policy is universal. According to my policy, I want this place to be more egalitarian. Over the years, I don't want to have any populations in poverty. It's not just about helping them here and now, but those who want to deepen inequality, of course, we would prefer those who prefer it. Is it working now? There was a problem with the mic. So, of course, we need to look at the existing options. Okay, so now I'd like to go back to the discussion that we heard earlier between Moran and Minister Orna Barvivai. The story of the boycott, which truly characterized the recent election campaigns. It has such a large projection on Israeli society, and we can see the results of the poll that will come out of here. And why has this become the main issue that designed a major political bloc, a boycott against any large political party or a leader of large political party? Look, the issue here is about governmental corruption, and we've drawn a red line against that. What about the right of innocence? What about the right of innocence? A person who's on trial. Look, let me remind you that it was Benjamin Netanyahu himself who said to Olmert, go and conduct your trial outside of the government. We remember these things, but actually beyond that, because in my worldview, my problem is with Benjamin Netanyahu specifically, not with it's not with the Likud, but it's not just about his trial case, his court case, but also I have I take issue with him on how he has treated my side of the political map, who works to narrow gaps, who care, who love this country. So you have legitimate criticism over him, but I'm saying, can you rule out the leader of another party, which is a democratic party, in contrast to other parties in the center-left bloc, which are not democratic at all? He was democratically elected. He represents such a large population. He received over 1 million mandates in the recent elections. They voted for the Likud led by Benjamin Netanyahu, and you're saying to that, no, we cannot accept that. On the contrary, the democratic game, I respect it. Anybody who votes has a right to vote, but there's a difference between coalitionary partnership and... I'm sorry, I can't hear comments from the audience. Thank you, madam. Thank you. But I'm going to be asking the questions from the stage, okay? And it's actually an important question. There's a difference between a coalitionary partnership and boycotting things. If there's something positive, then we'll support it from the opposition. But these important things that you're talking about, you could have been part of. You could have been Minister of Welfare, for example. This is a job you'll probably want, then why not? Look, listen. When you work with people, and you make a promise, to these people before the elections not to sit with, or whom you'll form a government with. So breaching that public trust, that's a major problem. And you can probably ask a lot of people sitting here about their trust in politicians, and they'll tell you that they're all liars, and that's a problem. Looking for defectors for a job, that's a problem, because ultimately our social cohesion is an outcome of the public's trust in the system. So that's one thing. But let me go back and remind you, I am some kind of a counterforce to Benjamin Netanyahu's economic policy. I want to set aside everything we've known from recent years, and let me remind you that at the end of the day, my party and its concept is in contradiction to privatization, to drying out social services, the increase of social gaps, and the correlation between capital and the lower classes. And this is something I'd like to remedy. It's true that we've reached a certain low point in the recent elections, and it means we need to examine ourselves and do some soul searching. Look, 83% of Israelis are in favor of raising minimum wages, but people also want a unity now, and you're not giving them that. So what? Look, unity is not something that we can use as a ticket to breach public trust and promises, at least not the Labour Party. Let me remind you that whenever we did that, people saw this as some kind of a personal betrayal, because people, voted and had a certain promise for the elections. And let me reiterate that our commitment to be a matter of fact opposition is also related to what the public expects of us. They expect that if there is something positive, if there's a reform that needs to be advanced, we're not going to vote against it just because we expect to be on one day on the other side. At the end of the day, look, this has been a difficult year. Let me tell this to everyone. Whenever we came to the Meli'ah, to the Knesset plenary, it was like a battlefield, offensive words and bickering. I'm not even saying from which side, but this is something that characterizes the entire Israeli society for years now, and I'm asking the extent of your responsibility for this as a politician. How do you see this concept, which is the title of this conference, for social cohesion? And then we'll talk about the political context to a national cohesion or national government. Can the two go together? Look, for me, social cohesion equals arvut hadatit, mutual responsibility. I don't see this term as a standalone without mutual responsibility, and regretfully, this is something we've lost in how the state of Israel treats its citizens. We've lost it, and we can see this in every public service, in every value which is supposed to enable us to lift our heads above the water. How can we talk about social cohesion, which is an empty concept, as we compare it to life itself? Anybody talking about social cohesion also needs to speak in terms of responsibility for the Israeli population. They should say that social cohesion is fictitious when people are dying younger in the north and south of Israel because of lack of access to proper medical facilities. When a mother needs to send her child to a therapist, a psychologist in the public psychological services, and if she doesn't have, then she needs to wait 2 years. So for me, that's our social cohesion, how the state sees its relationship between us and it. And when that crumbles down, there's no wonder that this is what we see. And the outgoing government that just served here for 18 months, and your party was part of it, did it rectify some of these important things you've just mentioned? Well, actually, when it comes to that, I had some fierce criticism over the government throughout the year, and I wasn't shy of expressing it. And I think that after the COVID crisis, the perception should be of injecting funds into these social systems in order to fix and rectify. If there's a surplus tax collections, we need to use that in order to increase all the services and infrastructure that are absent in Israel. We see that in all critical areas there's a shortage of manpower, and there's a total collapse, and it's the state of Israel that needs to rectify and rehabilitate that. I think the outgoing government did several good things, but not enough. I've said this, I'm saying this, and I will say this. And the Labour Party did try to do something about, and the reform regarding retirement age. We fought for it, and we added 900,000 shekels. I can elaborate on other reforms if you want me to. No, I'd like to go back to the second part of my previous question. Out of this crisis, we found ourselves as a very rifted tribal society, a divided society. How, Naama, can we start bringing or piecing back the pieces together? Look, in this context, I think we need to look at Israelism as something that we need to infuse or inject into it the ethos and the mosaic and everybody's place. And it's complicated. We talk about it, but this is something I'm constantly experiencing from the perspective of exclusion, who's in, who's out, and a part of the Israeli collective and the partnership and cohesion that has to do with putting things inside of a groups and population groups, and to look at the communities, and to look at places where the eye doesn't see, and that's a real challenge. And now I'm going back to the economy, because it's important to say that whenever there's a reform or something, I would always say in the finance committee, I would tell them, remember that at the end of every budgetary line item we have the lives of people. Let's look at Israelism like that. Everything we look at, we always need to see what's at the end of it. I grew up at Migdal HaEmek. Today I live in Haifa. This is a highly polluted region, as we all know, and I would like to know that my country, my sphere, sees us, looks at us, and that we are a real part of it in the sense of equality. Mansour Abbas is sitting here, and I think that instead of looking how come more budgets are given to the Arab sector, we need to ask ourselves how come there was such discrimination for 70 years, that there are such huge gaps in infrastructure, in social services, and in other services that we need to give earmarked funds in order to bridge these gaps. And when we as a country and a society are not willing to look and see where we didn't place, where we didn't invest, so talking about cohesion, that's something empty. But if we are talking about cohesion, let's talk about mutual responsibility. That's a beautiful sentence to end our conversation with member of Knesset Naama Lazimi. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you. Thank you to Lazimi. Good luck at the Knesset. And to the journalist Amir Ivgi, I'd like to inform you that we also approached the future members of coalition, but they are too busy in distributing the loot right now, so maybe some other time. And I'd like to invite member of Knesset Mansour Abbas, chairman of the United Arab Party, and journalist Amichai Atali, the Knesset correspondent from Yediot Ahronot newspaper. You already have a question, your first question ready. You can ask people about the applause we just heard. Hello, everyone. I'd like to ask one question, please. You probably wrote this question down. Yes, Danny. If Netanyahu will invite you to join the government, the right-wing government. Oh, what is this? You're interfering with my work. Oh, sorry. Yes or no? Yes or no? Because I need to step down before I take away his job. Look, I'm here to talk about social cohesion, you know. Okay. Good luck, folks. Thank you. Let's set politics aside. Let's leave politics outside. We're not going to do that. I can promise that to you, sir, and to everybody in the audience. But let's first talk about social cohesion. I'd like to say, we had some kind of a preparatory conversation, and I'd like to say that my instinct as an Israeli, as a Jew, when people talk about social cohesion with me, I'm only thinking about Jews. That's, my honest instinct. I mean, if we're here to be candid. So how does that make you feel when I tell you that as a Jew, an Israeli, a Zionist, and there are a lot of people in the audience who feel like me? What do you say that, how do you respond when I say that when people talk about social cohesion, I'm thinking about the unity of Jews and love between Jews? look at the beginning when I started when I was first approached by Carol and the ADL. I really thought that this was something that's more internal Jewish, but then I understood that the organization itself has evolved and also treats the Arab community in Israel and also Arabs outside of Israel. So I'm here to say that social cohesion has several aspects. Usually, when we meet an Arab politician, people like to talk about this issue, the relations between Jews and Arabs. Now, as an Arab, I never attributed weight to the fact that there are so many disputes within the Israeli community. And today, when I'm being asked about it in the Arab-speaking media, I bring this up. I say to Arabs, look, you need to notice that there are disagreements and divisions between the Jews. So as we see you as one monolith, you see us the same way as one monolith. Exactly. So I'm trying to say, just you need to realize that there's such a broad variety, not just of opinions within the Arab community, but there are some very powerful divisions and disagreements. And of course, there's the issue of the Arabs and the Jews with all the complexities of both sides. So the challenge that we're facing is huge, and it's not just limited to one group, to one community. We know that. Okay, so let's briefly try. If you could answer me, what is your vision for social cohesion in Israel with this complexity within the Jewish sector, within the Arab sector, and is there even such a thing as cohesion between these two sectors? So my party's vision, we've actually summarized it in 4 concepts: peace, mutual safety and security, partnership, and tolerance. We took the 2 concepts that were usually people focused on in the political arena, and we've added to that these social and interpersonal elements. We've added the partnership in a broad variety of topics, and also tolerance with the background of this bloody conflict and these fierce feelings. So I'm asking, please let me complete my answer. Okay, please go ahead. You asked me about my vision. Let me complete my answer. We need this within the Arab society because, as a politician who's in dispute, I also suffered from violence, not just verbal, also physical. So we definitely need that. We need that in the Israeli society. And just recently, we had the Memorial Day for the assassination of Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin. And with respect to the relations between Jews and Arabs, we've just had the events of May 2021, not so long ago. So there are quite a few challenges, but there's one answer: tolerance, inclusion, accepting the other. Even if you disagree, you must accept the other as he or she are. And here I'd like to emphasize the role of political leaders. The politicians themselves, are they contributing to social cohesion, or just in order to win the elections, are they adding fuel to the fire? Okay, so let's take this to a more practical level. How do you see this vision play out in daily lives? Jews and Arabs living together in the same towns, and Jews moving to Faham and Rat, or are we still talking about 2 separate communities living separately, or maybe they're meeting at the workplace? Look, there are places where there is interaction between Jews and Arabs, not in where they live. Of course, there are people who live together, not just in the mixed cities today. A lot of young Arabs and Arab families are moving to quote unquote regular Jewish towns. But we meet not just at our schools or government ministries and workplaces and in the private sector. Hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Jews and Arabs see each other, meet each other every day. So if we look fairly at the situation, there's no doubt that there is good fabric of relations. Yes, there are tensions, but until now, It's despite the fact that until now there's been no investment in order to foster and cultivate this relationship. I wanted to say between Jews and Arabs, but actually that's even not enough, because the culture and values that bring people to be in peace together, this is something we need within the Arab community and within the Jewish community and between these two communities. So starting in the school system, that's a good place to start, but we shouldn't neglect the political system, which could either improve the situation or ruin it and spoil it. Okay. So you talked about two things. So let's talk about the political. This recent government, which was a very unique attempt, a unique experiment in inclusion in Israeli politics, did this government fail? Of course it didn't fail. If you're talking about the process of a political partnership that another Arab party will join the coalition, that is undoubtedly a positive step, even though it did create tension on the other side. But you need to notice the presence of Ra'am, of my party, within this coalition brought the edges of the right and the left together. The extreme of the right wing, which of Zionist right wing, which is Yamina, and Meretz together. I don't think you could have placed all these parties together into one coalition without the presence of Ra'am. So it was the presence of the Arabs that led to cohesion between the Jews. Yes. So that means if you are introducing this element of the Jewish and Arab relationship, it'll definitely improve. It will create tension between the two sectors, between the Arab sector and the Jewish sector, but undoubtedly it will contribute to social cohesion. But when we look at the bottom line, actually this coalition was undermined because of the inability of Arab Knesset members from your party and also from Meretz to cooperate with the Jewish Zionist agenda of the Knesset. So can this exist in the generations to come? Yes, of course it can exist. You need to notice that our crisis was with respect to specific individuals. It wasn't at the level of the parties themselves. Ra'am and Yamina and Meretz and Tikva Hadasha and all these parties got along together as parties. The fact that several Knesset members in several places called and especially found it difficult, especially in Yamina, they found it difficult to contend with this challenge and couldn't internalize its significance. It doesn't mean that the process failed. If you're looking at the level of the parties and the different factions, we've proven that it can be done together. Okay, if so, is there any room for your cooperation with the government that's currently being formed? Look, this is the regular opinion, the fixed view of Ram. We were elected to represent the Arab community. We have a lot of problems and violence and crime and disagreements. So we do want to work with whatever government is in place so that we can complete these programs we've started and to bring additional solutions to the cardinal problems of the Arab community. When we talk about crime and violence, the person who brought this program to the government and approved and allocated a budget for that was the Ram party, my party. Now, Ram took upon itself, this party, to improve the capabilities of the police and the law enforcement authorities. Who will benefit from that? Only the Arabs, or ultimately all Israeli citizens will benefit from that? So this is why I'm saying the cooperation or our work with the government, even when you're outside of it, will definitely project itself. Look, but we know that this government is based on the narrative that the previous government is the government of the Muslim Brothers. They try to call them terror supporters, etc. So can you emotionally cooperate with such people who say such things? Look, this is the kind of discourse which is the antithesis of social cohesion. We also negotiated with them. We're still waiting to see half an hour before I signed the coalition agreement. I decided on a certain line. What, you mean half an hour before you signed the coalitionary agreement with Bennett? or with Netanyahu. 30 minutes before we signed the coalitionary agreement that we did sign, I spoke with Benjamin Netanyahu. So what I'm trying to say here is that Ra'am's willingness to accept the other, and I've said this several times, some people criticize me about this from the Arab community. They said, how can you accept the entire Israeli community as it is with even the radical right? I said, yes, I accept. I don't necessarily need to agree with everything, but a basic acceptance that exists. So in that conversation with Netanyahu, a moment before you signed with Bennett and Lapid, what did you talk about? Let's not start a political conversation here. Let's stick to our topic. What I'm trying to say, I'm asking you, I'm saying that politics can contribute to social cohesion if it's based on a certain view of citizenship and values. It is the citizenship that brings us all together here. I'll tell you why it's relevant, because politics and social cohesion are constantly in play. Right now, there are coalition negotiations going on. You served as the demon of the previous opposition for them to regain their power, and it worked. So can you now cooperate with such people? Did anybody approach you? Look, let me, or give me, why don't you give me a different solution, a different means to change reality? According to my theory, you can continue to wait for the change for another 50 years. Each side expects the other side to make that change. But what we did in my party, the Ram party, I said, I'm not going to impose any conditions for a change on the other side. I'm saying, first of all, let's establish a partnership. Let's sit together. Let's manage our disputes through partnership, because then you truly want to reach certain agreements. And this is exactly what had evolved over this past year in the coalition. And then during this partnership, there will be a mutual change, not just a threatening one. Okay, but I'm asking you now, it's not the same people you were engaged with last time. When it's that other person and this new government, do you think that you could actually enter such a government or such a coalition like you did last time? Look, Amichai, yesterday I refused 20 political interviews in the different channels. I came here to speak about social cohesion and its political context. You know, even the people here, they're not here to talk about the formation of a new government or new coalition. That's not our subject here. You know what, ladies and gentlemen, I'll take these applause as a comment for me, as a remark for me, but I would like to talk about a specific coalition. Yeah, look, I've told you, we are willing to work. We accept the outcomes of the elections. We respect what the people wanted, what the majority wanted, even though this majority is in dispute. I mean, if we look at the actual votes, it's, each bloc got more or less the same number. It's 50-50 more or less, but there were two parties at their left wing that didn't manage to enter the Knesset, and this is why we have this significant gap in representation in the Knesset. But anyhow, this has been the people's decision, and if a government will be formed led by Benjamin Netanyahu, this will be the government of Israel, and we as Arabs in Israel will have to work with that government. Period. Okay, now I'd like to ask you about a very specific cooperation, because undoubtedly the most burning issue in the Arab community, which you and your colleagues constantly bring up, is the issue of violence and absence of governance and the lack of personal safety. And it seems like the Minister for Homeland Security will be Itamar Ben-Gvir. We have to recognize that. I can see the audience, so I can't tell which side is applauding each time, but I'm just asking, your ability, this much appreciated pragmatism in cooperation, will it even take you to cooperate with Itamar Ben-Gvir, who wants to eradicate Arab crimes for his reasons, and you want that for your reasons? But Will you be willing to cooperate with him? Look, until I entered the Knesset and really started looking into this phenomena of crime and violence in the Arab community, and I started comparing it with crime which went rampant in Israeli community as well in the past. And when we wrote the report of the Director General's Committee, and based on this report, we came up with the plan for the eradication of crime and violence. You know, once you study this, you understand the different sides, and there the state or even the government, because ultimately this report was approved by Government Resolution 852, that the government admits that it failed and that this phenomena of crime and violence, especially organized crime, is a huge problem, and it's a huge mistake created by the Israeli system. So anybody who now wants to say, I wish to eradicate crime and violence in Arab society or in the Arab sector or in general, has to study and learn all this material, and then to take certain measures or form a policy within the Ministry of the Interior or another ministry in order to provide this solution. We already have a government program, and it has been approved in principle by Netanyahu's government in Resolution 852, and then the Lapid-Bennett government approved it and allocated a budget for it. So it's not that we're starting from scratch. You know, actually 2022, this is the first year in which the crime rates have begun to, you know, the curve of crimes has begun to flatten, not just to flatten, it's even begun to go down. And you are a pragmatist. Is there any chance that we'll see you cooperating with Itamar Ben-Gvir? Look, I gave you a general answer. I don't want to come out with a headline now that I'm willing to cooperate with Itamar Ben-Gvir, etc. He needs to prove that he's a minister serving all the citizens of the state of Israel and that he will operate in a very mamlachti manner. But unfortunately, all his declarations so far, his entire approach is completely unacceptable, and that's an understatement. And we'll see if he'll actually be appointed as Minister of Homeland Security. Thank you, Mansour Abbas. Thank you. So now we are going to take a break, a coffee break, and then in 30 minutes we will have various panels. You'll be able to hear these panels only with the headsets in Hebrew, English, and Arabic. This is how it will be conducted, and you can switch between the panels in the push of a button. That's how you can hear what's being said in these panels. The channels will be here on the screens, and that's it. Enjoy your coffee break.